All right, this is my second crack at taping this one, so I'm going to have to. I went 32 minutes last time. This shutting up thing is really hard for me to do. But I'm going to try to not talk quick, but be a little bit more efficient in my presentation. So here goes. We're going to kind of carry on. So in the Piaget lecture, we talked about the cognitive stages that children go through. In this lecture, we're going to focus much more on very young children. And specifically, we're going to focus on the relationship they form between themselves and their primary caregiver. I may slip into using the term mother quite a bit because obviously, typically, the mother is the primary caregiver. But really, I mean the primary caregiver. The claim is that early relationship is very important in setting the tone for life. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Let's get into it. All right, week 8, lecture 5. I'm dedicating this lecture to little Owen Walker here. Owen born, you recall, about a week after this course started. This is a picture of him about a month old, so I kind of think of him as growing along with the course, so to speak. He's a human biomarker of how far we've gone. And so I dedicate this lecture to him and to Rob and Nicole, who are his parents, and hopefully they learn something that benefits everybody as we go through this lecture. Put a real face on it. We're going to talk a lot about a procedure really analyzed in depth by somebody named Mary Ainsworth. Something called the strange situation test. It's a really interesting process for trying to get at how, well, the relationship really between a primary caregiver and an infant. And Mary was the one that kind of started this procedure, did a lot of analysis on it, and ultimately claimed that when you really break things down, there's kind of 4 sorts of relationships. And she claimed that those relationships are highly predictive of the future relationships a child has, that they're really setting the stage, kind of creating a blueprint for social relationships. And so that first relationship, she claimed, is really critical. So what we're going to do is we're going to describe her procedure. Then I'm going to tell you about these 4 relationships, both how they're exhibited as a child and how they then translate to adulthood. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the dynamics that actually may have created each kind of relationship. Okay, so let's do the process itself, strange situation test. This is a lab, a developmental psychology lab. Psychology labs take many different forms. This one takes the form of essentially a nice, homey looking room with some chairs and a table and typically some toys and maybe some magazines. This would be a one-way glass. So the researchers are behind this one-way mirror. And the way this would work, at least the main condition, different conditions are sometimes tested, but the main condition that we're going to focus on works in the following way. The parent and child come in the room. The parent typically sits in a chair and reads a magazine. They're instructed, just go and do something, by yourself, so to speak, because we're curious about, first thing, what the child does. So the child is free to explore the room. And again, there's some toys and stuff around, there's some cool things. So they're free to explore the room, but the parent is not supposed to guide them in their exploration. The parent is supposed to sit still and kind of chill. And so the first thing we want to know is, what's the child do here? Do they stick close to the parent? Do they go and explore the room? How explorative are they? So that's kind of important. Now, not long thereafter, a stranger enters the room. This is the strange situation. Stranger enters the room, talks to the parent for a little bit, and then approaches the child and tries to interact with the child, maybe playing a game, something like that. And again, here we're very curious about how the child reacts. Do they go to the parent for support, security? Do they interact with a stranger? Do they treat the stranger in any way differently than the parent? I mean, do we see a clear preference for the parent? Or do they interact with a stranger, much the same way as they interact with a parent? So we're curious about that. Now, here's a sort of critical one, and this is where, some people who watch these videos, and you'll see the videos, find this part really hard. The parent leaves the room, leaving the child with the stranger. Many children are not happy about this. And many people watching the videos think, how could a parent bring a child into this situation? Because the children get upset. They get angry. Well, not necessarily angry, but they tend to get upset. They cry, they whatever. Um, and the parent is away for a while. Stranger kind of tries to comfort, does what they can, but at some point, not too long thereafter, the parent returns and attempts to comfort the child. Okay. Again, we want to know in both of these steps, how does the child react? And especially on the return, on what's called the reunion. Does the child go to the mother? Is the child happy, first of all, that the mother's back? Does it go to the mother for comfort and support? See, I slipped into it, to the primary caregiver for comfort and support. Or does the child show some level of anger or resentment or detachment when the parent comes back? Do they steer clear of the parent? Do they seem miffed that the parent left and came back? Some children do. Okay, and so as we ask these questions, imagine someone behind the glass watching all these reactions, and based on the reactions, they're ultimately going to classify an attachment, and this is what they call it, between the child and the parent. So this isn't about the child. It's not about the parent, although it is going to be a little bit more about the parent. But what this is really about is the attachment between the two. Okay, and it's going to classify, the researcher is going to classify that attachment into one of four categories. The best is a secure attachment. Okay, the sort of markers in the child of a secure attachment during this strange situation test is, first of all, they are able to separate from the parent. They explore when they first come in the room. They're not, worried and stuck to their parent. They actually go ahead and explore. When something frightens them, so for example, when the stranger tries to interact with them, or even when the stranger first enters the room, anything that frightens them, they go to the parent. They basically go to the parent for security, in a sense, when they're frightened. That's considered to be a good thing. That shows that they trust their parent to provide some sort of comfort when they need it. When the parents leave and then return, these children are very happy to see their parent return. So they're showing positive emotion. And in general, you see through the whole interaction that the child clearly has a preference for the parent over the stranger. Okay, and so that's obvious throughout. So when you see these kinds of indicators, they suggest that this child and parent have what's called a secure attachment. And we know that these children, if we follow them through life, tend to enter into trusting, lasting relationships. They tend to be higher self-esteem. They tend to be more comfortable sharing their feelings with friends and partners, and they seek out social interactions. Okay, so to an extent, these children are socially competent, and they seem to interact very well as social beings, and they seem successful as social beings. So this is, the good one. Now we're going to talk about three not so good ones, and then we'll talk about how they come about. So the first not so good one is called avoidant attachment. This is what you might see as an experimenter in the Ainsworth task. First of all, the child does not seem overly drawn to the parent at all, even from right into the room. The child might, yes, they're exploring, but they're exploring in kind of in a very different way. So these children will explore, but they'll probably always keep tabs on when their parent is, because if they're frightened, they're going to go to their parent for support. These children don't even seem to care that their parents are there. Okay, so they may explore, but they're exploring in a very different, more independent way. When they are scared, like for example, when the stranger comes and talks to them or something, they do not go to their parent for comfort. Even when they clearly look distressed, their first reaction is certainly not to go running to the parent for comfort. Okay, and in general, they just don't seem to be any more attached to their parent than they are to this strange individual. So you just really get the sense of a coldness between the parent and the child. And we call that an avoidant attachment. Okay? These children, when they grow up, perhaps not surprisingly, have problems with intimacy. They really don't they don't give much of themselves emotionally in romantic relationships. So we hear terms like someone's afraid to get hurt, and so they don't invest too much in a relationship, because if the relationship doesn't work, they don't want to be too broken up about it. unable or unwilling to share thoughts or feelings with others. So these children are socially not doing very well. Okay? In a very specific way, that very cold, keep things to themselves. You can almost think of it as strong independence if you want to put a positive spin to it, but independence that's really seemingly getting in the way of social interactions. Now, here's two that are even, to some extent, a little more messed up, although maybe not. Maybe you wouldn't say that to ambivalent. But ambivalent is the sense you get is that the child is somewhere in between those other two. So they're probably wary of strangers. And they may show, in that sense, a hint of a preference to the parent over the stranger. So they do have, a hint of that preference. They get really upset when the parent leaves, but they're not really comforted when the parent comes back. So let me, contrast this. For a secure attachment situation, the infant is upset when the parent leaves, but when the parent comes back, that reunion is critical, because when the parent comes back, the secure attachment children are like, oh, thank goodness, I feel better now. These children are more like, oh, I can't trust you. Man, so it's like they're still angry, like, okay, you're back, fine. So, at some level you imagine them happy the parent's back, but not happy to the point it's like, oh, okay, you're back, everything's fine. Everything's not fine for these children. Again, we'll get a sense of why in a second. But for these kind of children, so they're kind of in the middle. They want their parent around, they seem to prefer their parent, and yet they don't just completely socially interact in that positive way with their parents. When they become adults, reluctant to become close to others, always worried that their partner does not love them, and they become very upset when a relationship ends. So these are hallmarks of one of these ambivalent attachment children. Okay, so again, we're just thinking about the categorization mostly. Here's the third one. It's really categorized, this disorganized one. People sometimes think of these things as catch-all groups. Like, okay, these first three, you can kind of imagine these behaviors that you see linking somebody to groups. In this fourth category, the children are often just behaving bizarrely. Okay, they're showing a mix of all these kind of behaviors that tend to be negative, but the point too here is the real critical one, that they seem dazed, confused, or apprehensive. It's like they don't know what to do. Okay, the other children you kind of got sense that something was going on in their minds, and they were either, like even in the ambivalent one, when the parent comes back, you get the sense that the child is like happy they're back, but kind of pissed that they left, right? In this case, it's like the child just doesn't understand, in the case of the disorganized, doesn't understand what they should be doing, how they should be reacting. They're upset, they're emotional, they're confused, but not in any organized way. They seem kind of random in their reactions. Now, this will sound really odd, but just take this for now, and you'll understand in a second. So as they get older, by age 6 already, they may take on a parental role and may actually act as the caregiver towards the parent. This is what this really suggests, and what we're now going to talk about, is that sometimes these attachments are due to the way the mother, and I'm going to focus on mothers for a little bit here, interacts with her children, and the signals that the mother's sending. So let's just go there. There's a lot in this table, but it actually brings everything together in a way that makes sense. So I'm going to start at the bottom with this disorganized, because I think it makes the most sense. The claim here is, if we look at the mothers, typically in this case, this is more common with younger mothers, more common with mothers who have substance abuse disorders, single mothers who still are in distress of some sort, not very good family support, that kind of thing. And the claim is that these mothers are anxious and worried, and they don't feel like they're ready to be mothers, and they're scared of being a mother, and all of that. And so that anxiety and neurosis kind of sneaks over to the child. The child feels all this tension, all this worry, all this incompetence, in a sense. The mother feeling like they're not ready for this. The child ends up depressed, angry, passive, non-responsive. So the child is confused. They don't know what to do and what to expect and what's going to happen next. And that's why by age 6, sometimes they become the primary caregiver. It's like they would rather take control because this parent they have is just not a very good parent, not a very capable parent. And so, this disorganized attachment can really mess them up, and it can mess them all through life. Um, so a lot of this is spoken in terms of their needs. So when the parent is very chaotic like this, the child doesn't know how to get what they need out of the parent because the parent is just too erratic, and so there's no rhyme or reason, and so the child doesn't know how to behave, essentially, doesn't know how to get its needs met. Now, think of that with respect to, say, a secure attachment. So we would all like a secure attachment. When you look at mothers, in the case of a secure attachment, when the baby's upset, the mother is there. They intervene quickly, sensitively, and consistently. Okay, when the baby cries, and this is true of young babies, eventually, yes, they will learn to cry to get attention. But when they're young, they're crying because they need something. And the mothers that are there to help, that are sensitive and that are, especially consistently there. Consistent will be, the difference between some of these other ones. That tends to lead to the secure attachment because the baby believes and trusts that his needs will be met. Okay. Filling in the middle picture here, avoidant attachment. The notion is, why do you get this avoidant? That's that cold relationship between the parent and child. How does that come to be? Well, the claim is that happens when the parent is distracted. So imagine, for example, you sometimes hear situations of a single parent where that single parent, primary caregiver, is still in the prime of their life and is still socially very active and maybe is still looking for that husband or wife. And so it's kind of like their life is still ongoing. They're not ready to just devote their life to the child. And so they may be distracted, they may be distant, they may be disengaged. And the child senses this and starts to believe that, hey, when I need something, often mommy or daddy are busy. And so they start to believe that my needs won't be met. I'm on my own here. I can't count on somebody else. And that's why they get that cold independence. Okay. Finally, with this ambivalent one, it's sort of somewhere in between. So, the parent in this case is inconsistent, unlike the secure attachment, inconsistent. Sometimes they're like a secure attachment mother. They're there for the baby. They help them. Sometimes they're more like an avoidant attachment mother. They're busy. They're neglectful. And so the child now ends up in this middle stage where sometimes their needs are met, but they can't count on it. They can't rely on it. And that makes them anxious, insecure, angry. All right? So you get the full picture there. Now, okay, we've been talking first couple of years. And again, Ainsworth would say those are critical. That's where you're setting up the blueprint for relationships, and you get a sense of why she thinks that. Okay, so I'm going to let you think about that, but now we're going to move on to the rest of the child's life. And Robbie and Nicole, the next question is, what kind of parent will you be when this child starts pushing the boundaries? A lot of this is about boundaries. And most people find this a really kind of interesting way. Everybody can't help but think of their parents and their children, if they have parents, and how they're parenting. A lot of psychologists believe you can take parenting styles and kind of talk about them in terms of the names they give to these dimensions changes, as you'll see. In this case, it's control and support. Support kind of meaning loving intimacy, control meaning just you want control over things. And so if we imagine low control parents, but we imagine, let's start with the uninvolved. So low control, low support. This uninvolved parent is like that avoidant parent in a sense. They don't set any rules for their children, they don't monitor their children, and they don't really offer any support. It's kind of like you're on your own. So there's this little kids will be kids, you'll learn from your mistakes. So the parent is kind of busy, they're occupied. And so it's up to the child to now figure stuff out. Okay? I'm going to talk about the consequences of these in a moment, but let's just think about these quickly. The permissive parent is also Similar but different. The permissive parent shows more love for their child. They still allow the child to do just about anything they want to do. So they're still not setting rules, boundaries, limitations. They're letting the children do what they want to do, but they love the child. And sometimes these permissive parents are the ones that you see where they want to be their, a mother wants to be their daughter's buddy, or the father wants to be their son's pal. Um, they would rather be friends than parents, is sort of the notion. So they don't want to be setting rules. They don't want to be that kind of person. They want to have fun, good times. So they love their kids, but they let them do whatever they want. I'll trust you to do the right thing, is the phrase here. These are the kind of parents we all wanted. But should we have? Well, let's kind of hold on. And let's go to the two that want more control. So these are the more controlling parents, but again, there's kind of a bad and a good controlling parent. The bad is the authoritarian. So this is the my house, my rules, you do what I say, period, buster. And if you don't do what I say, you will taste the belt or something like that. So these people, these parents are very tough, very strong. They have rules. They don't need to justify their rules. They don't need to explain them to you. It's their house. You will do as they say, and if you don't, you'll know it. So you know these are hard ass parents to an extent. Versus similar but different, and this distinction is critical. This is the kind of parent that is seen as the best kind of parent, authoritative parent. So these parents still have rules. And they still expect their children to follow them, but they're willing to justify the rules. Okay, there's a rationale behind their rule. They often communicate this rationale to their children. They will allow rules to be bent if the general rationale still holds. So, you know, one example of that is maybe you have to be home by 10 p.m. every night because we have to know you're home and safe so that we can go to sleep feeling comfortable and relaxed. And a child might say, yeah, but man, this particular night we were having movie night at my friend's house, and their parents will be there the whole time, and they will drive me home at midnight and make sure I'm in and the door's locked and blah blah blah. And maybe a parent would say, okay, in that case, that's all right because we still know that you're safe, and that's the central thing. So these parents will negotiate, but ultimately they're still in control, and everything is about trying to be good parents. Like we're setting these rules not arbitrarily, but for good reason. And so there's things like I'll care and I'll give you the freedoms you earn, but for safety related issues, you'll do as I say. Okay, so authoritative. Now, what's the result of these parenting styles? Okay, first of all, things have moved a little bit on this graph relative to the previous one. It's kind of flipped. And they've called these things different. So this is now high responsiveness. In the previous, that's what would have been support. Responsiveness, support. High demands, that's what in the previous one would be control. Okay, but again, same notion. So that these are now the more controlling ones. Now let's look at the authoritative, first of all, the good one. Okay, in this case, when parents are authoritative, their children tend to be self-assertive, independent, friendly, cooperative, motivated, competent. That's what you want, Robin Nicole. You want this sort of style and this sort of child, generally. These authoritarians, their children tend to be kind of beaten down, withdrawn, apathetic. Girls tend to end up being very shy. Boys tend to end up being very angry. They've been held down for a long time and they're carrying a lot of hostility. And they're both generally unmotivated, incompetent. Okay, they've just been pushed down for too long, and they start to incorporate that into their sense of who they are. So not good. These are the two parents that are very allowing their children to do anything they want. Now these permissive parents, these are the buddies. These are the ones that want to be friends with their kids, right? That's what we think we all want our parents to be. But when you look at the children later in life from these permissive families, you see that they tend to be impulsive, dependent, undisciplined, immature, risk takers, manipulative, socially competent, self-centered. Okay, you don't want to have a relationship with one of these children because these children are used to being able to do anything they want, anytime they want, with impunity. And while that may have worked with their parents, it doesn't tend to work very well in other social situations. They show all this impulsive blah 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 blah. I think I was somewhere. My parents were somewhere in between here, and I think I maybe have a hint of both of these characteristics at times. But anyway, that's the permissive. Now this is the uninvolved. This is the distracted parent who just doesn't, really. The problem with an uninvolved parent is the child doesn't feel loved. It's true in the authoritarian as well. With this low responsiveness, that's how loved do they feel. So again, these people are unmotivated, self-effacing, indifferent, destructive. Sometimes they personally, feel like they're not worth anything and they should be heard or whatever. Detached, socially incompetent. So, not good. All right. So again, the morals from all of that, from the Mary Ainsworth stuff is for parents, try to breed that secure attachment. And you do that by being responsive to your very young child, consistently and sensitively responsive. That's the best thing you can do as a very new mother, very new caregiver, that you too, Rob. That's the best thing you can do. As they age, then this style is one you would like to adopt. One where you do have rules, you do have boundaries, but you communicate them clearly with your children, you're willing to negotiate them in logical, rational ways, and you're constantly giving the impression to your children that you do love them, you care for them, the rules are there for their protection, and for their proper development, in the sense. That's the morals. There you go. Parenting 101. All right, so some videos. These are just some videos related to everything we talked about. I'm just going to say that really quick. Check them out. You'll like them, especially the strange situation. It'll really make that come home. These readings I threw in because we've done 2 lectures now on developmental psychology, but it would normally be a whole chapter. If you found those lectures really interesting, check these out. These will show you some of the other really interesting studies in developmental psych. All right? I'm going to shut up now because I feel like I still went too long. Bye-bye. Have a good day.